I haven't, no. The last time I saw anybody from the original Be Bop was Charlie, who sadly died last year. It's ironic because one of the first things when I got off the plane here yesterday, what came flooding back was occasions of dashing to get on the plane to leave LA, going to some other place on a Be Bop Deluxe tour, and having to leave the hire car with the boot up because the tour manager got us there too late, parked on the loading and unloading zone only, and face the consequences later, make a mad dash to get to the plane. And Charlie being there with us, so we're doing that.
When's the last time you saw him?
I saw him when I was recording an album which in this country came out under the title On a Blue Wing, but in England it was called Getting the Holy Ghost Across. And I was down at a studio called Surrey Sounders with the initial recordings for that, and Charlie came down to visit me. It was just outside London, and he was at that time working on a market stall selling fruit and vegetables, but he'd been in a band called Tandoori Cassette with Sal Espana, who used to be Alex Harvey's guitarist. And also was one of the ex-Jethro Tull band as well. It was a sort of people who had been in other bands and they'd put this band Tandoori Cassette together, but it hadn't been going too well. And he came down just to see me, and he was saying at that time, he said, I think I'm going to go back to Australia. Always a New Zealander, he spent a long time in Australia. And he did do, he went back there. And actually I think he ended up back in New Zealand. I got cards from him for a while. And one of the things that's a real fault with me is that I get so busy with projects. I mean to keep in touch with people, and somehow time drifts on. Before I know it, I haven't written back and so on. So I lost touch with him over the last few years. And then someone wrote to the fan club that we've got recently started in England, sort of information service, that a young guy in the town near where I live is running and selling. And I've been getting messages from people asking if the rumours about Charlie dying are true. And this was the middle of last year. And I said, no, I haven't heard of him for a while, but I've not heard any problems at all. I'm sure he's fine. And then, just after Christmas, we got a communication through the fan club from a guy, I think in the States, who got a copy of a New Zealand paper who said he died, he collapsed just before Christmas, which ironically was after these rumours had been flying around. And he'd been involved in some kind of community care program where he was a counsellor for people who were going through legal processes, through trials, court cases, and were having traumatic experiences as a result of this, and he was a part of a team of counsellors who helped them through this bad time. And he'd also given up drink and drugs and all the rest of it, and become very healthy and cycled everywhere, and was an example of healthy living, apparently. It's only this piece in the paper. And he literally collapsed and had a heart attack at the moment. So I was obviously, very upset by that, especially he spent a hell of a long time.
How did you hook up with him? You just seemed...
I auditioned for bass players. So the original Be Bop Deluxe had a different lineup. And ironically, again, the original lineup of Be Bop, the guy who was the rhythm guitarist, Ian Parkin, died also last year. He was a year younger than me. And he was a school friend. We were at school together. We started playing guitar at the same time. And I met him at school. He was in my class, but the reason we sort of became pals was because he actually had an electric guitar when I had an acoustic one. We got talking about guitars, and he said I had an electric one, so I said, okay, you can be my friend. You've got an electric guitar. I wanted to have a go on that. So, I hadn't seen him since the early 70s. And he died, he collapsed on stage. He's had a band that he was playing bass in, and brain hemorrhage. So it's kind of really depressing on all kinds of levels. You're not just the thing of, you start to realise how mortal you are because people are your contemporaries are dying, but it's depressing the fact that there's people that played such a big part in your life and who through your own fault, you've let that relationship slip away, that relationship slide away, and I really regretted it afterwards. I wish I'd have kept in touch. For what reasons, I don't really know. Maybe it's selfish or what, I don't know. Maybe you think that, you know, at least I felt guilty. I felt I should have still had contact with Charlie and Liz. But when I was younger and the band was so busy and things, it was always, you know, decisions what to do next and so on. The artistic thing was always calling the shots. It was okay, now we've exhausted this possibility, now let's move on, so I need to work with different people. And it's very selfish, it's terrible. It is awful.
Charlie seemed a perfect compliment to you. You seemed very serious and you seemed completely relaxed and free.
Well, it came home to me recently because somebody dug out a video which I hadn't seen of a live concert that Be Bop did at Leicester in Montford Hall, some bootleg video that's been going around, plus 3 TV shows. And I mean, I hated everything we did the minute we did it. When I finished an album, that was it. It's wrong, you know. Next, put it behind me, move on. And so I never dwelt on the past, and I never thought that Be Bop Deluxe was very good, and I didn't think the songwriting was very good, and I wanted to move on to the next thing and see if I could do something that satisfied me. And it's taken a long time before I've been able to look back and evaluate the past. And suddenly somebody said, we've got these videos, maybe you'd like to see them. And I thought, do I want to see them or not? And when I watched them, I was really moved, you know, because it was a lot better than I remembered it to be. And Charlie was just brilliant. And we were a perfect foil, exactly right for each other. Because he was just sort of bouncing around, having a good time. You know. I tended to be physically tied to a microphone and a pedal board anyway. I could never sort of have the freedom to leap about like he can. But it worked perfectly, and he was such a natural player, great musician. You know. So I miss him a lot now, you know, more than I ever thought I would do. You know. And certainly, people said, would you ever reform Be Bop Deluxe? And I'd say, no. And then I'd started to think about, wouldn't it be interesting to reform, not to recreate the past, but to see what would happen if we did one album together, and based it on what we feel now, as opposed to, in fact, see what kind of a band we would become. But now that this has happened to Charlie, there's no way it could ever be the same. You know? Not the same as it was then, but it would never be Be Bop Deluxe. So I think that's really.
It's officially closed the book.
It's officially closed the book.
The first time I saw you was in Los Angeles when you opened for Blue Oyster Cult.
Oh, yeah.
And you made reference to Angel one time in an article about the fans.
That's right, the satin flares and everything.
They kind of invented that whole little long hair.
Yeah.
But I went in there, I had never heard one song by Be Bop Deluxe.
Right.
Walked in there as a diehard Blue Oyster Cult fan. Walked out of there, I don't know who the hell Blue Oyster Cult is anymore. These guys, you just blew everybody away. It was really strange. And you didn't play any encore.
No, we weren't allowed.
Oh, was that okay? Because the rumor went through. First, people said, "Oh my God," because they started booing when you wouldn't come back out. The fans started booing in the crowd, and half the people are like, "Well, they don't do encores," and the other half were saying, "No, they're not allowed because of the headliner thing."
We toured. We did a few gigs with those from Blue Oyster Cult on band, another tour, and they didn't like us. And at one time, I said something I shouldn't have said, but we had a problem. What happened was that we were doing one gig, I can't remember where it was in an 18,000 seat stadium somewhere in the Midwest, and the trucks carrying our equipment had an accident, or one of them had an accident, and come off the road and turned over, and the equipment was damaged, and we couldn't do the gig. And we were waiting for, you know, see if there was a possibility of salvaging this and whether we could borrow some equipment from Blue Oyster Cult with the headline act, and they wouldn't let us do it. And so the promoter said, look, I understand it's not your fault, but even though it's a Blue Oyster Cult gig, there's a lot of people out there also who come to see you, right? Would you go on stage and just explain the situation in person? And maybe, you know, we won't have problems then, you know. So I said, okay. And I've still got photographs of this event happening. And we had just street clothes on because we'd been travelling, you know, and our wardrobe trunk was in. So the band said, well, you can speak. And I'm not going on my own, you know. So Charlie came on with me, and Simon, and Andrew wouldn't go on stage. And I've got a photograph taken from the wings where you can see me at the mic, and then there's Charlie next to me and Simon this side. and then beyond us is this sea of 18,000 people. And in the front few rows, you see people with Be Bop Deluxe scarves, you know. And so I apologised. I explained why we couldn't play, and I said that I hope we come back on the next tour and make up for it for them. And I thought I'm going to make light of it because it was so, you know, such a bad situation. So I made a joke, and I said, I've thought of different ways of getting out of this situation, you know. And I said the only thing that came to my mind is we could teach Blue Oyster Cult to play a couple of our numbers for you, but to be honest, I haven't got 6 months to spare. And one of their crew members heard this and went backstage and told the band, well, that was it. I mean, they didn't like us from the beginning, but I think from then on, we never got sound checks. We got half power on the PA system, everything they could do to sabotage it.
Blue Oyster Cult did become Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
They even played Magic Mountain. That's
really?
Yeah,
wow.
they played Magic Mountain. So
yeah.
they got their karma.
They got their bank balance though, which is more than I got.